record. Hello, everybody. It's the first full edition of Pod Pit today, and I'm very, very pleased to introduce you to a very good friend of mine, Paul Felton. So, Paul has agreed to join us and share some of his stories. He's a very well-known graphic designer, and he's going to share some of his story today. We're going to touch on things about his why, some challenges, some goals, and also some adjustments into parenting. So there's lots to talk about. So welcome, Paul.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
Up as well.
You are first up, my friend. You are first up. Yeah.
This will be the one you look back on in years and think, God, remember how rubbish that first one was, and how much better with.
Well, I did an introductory one yesterday with a friend of mine from the Midlands, and I actually interviewed for her podcast many months ago, and she agreed to interview me as an introductory for this. So I've got some practice, mate. So don't worry. So she popped me cherry yesterday. So what I'd like to do is just pass over to you now, mate. Obviously, to introduce yourself and your business and what you're all about. But just a quick recap of how we know each other. So Paul and I, we went to university together. I think we finished in 2005, so that feels a very, very long time ago now. But we've been good friends ever since then, really. We kept in touch ever since, and we sort of established businesses in the Midlands region, and obviously things have changed for me in more recent times. But Paul's still there. He's had a really interesting career, and we're going to find out some more about that now. So I'll pass over to you, mate. Off you go.
Thank you very much. Established business on the same day, we found out yesterday as well.
We did, yeah. 1st of February. So happy 4 or 5? 4 years.
4 for me and 9 for you, isn't it?
9 for me, yeah.
So we can have a joint 5th and 10th birthday party then, hopefully, if we're allowed out by then.
Yeah, if we're not grounded.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I am a co-founder of a studio called Common Curiosity. So there's me, that's based in Birmingham, and my business partner, Alex, who is based in London. We call ourselves a multidisciplinary studio. We sort of focus predominantly in brand identity design, but we also do lots of print design, exhibition, spatial design, little bits of digital, kind of a mix of everything, really. I think generally when you're doing brand work and print, you tend to get loads of weird and wonderful things come up. So we stretch to lots of different things, but kind of brand and print and spaces are our kind of main area that we work in. It might be worth me just sort of going back to from uni when we met and just sort of, I don't know, just say how I got to kind of where I am, really, because
that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean 2005 does feel like ages ago, doesn't it, really? But I think once we left uni, we went down to London, didn't we, for new blood, and I got a little bit of the sort of London bug when I was down there, and then I sort of decided, I think around that time, that I wanted to try and get down to London. So after that, I came back to Birmingham. Worked here for 2 years. I didn't really realize at that point that sort of flat sharing was a thing. I didn't, the prospect of living in with strangers just felt very surreal. So me and Beck, my partner, saved up for a couple of years after working in Birmingham, moved down to London. My sort of idea was really that I would end up coming back to Birmingham eventually. So to get down to London, experience some different studios, and get loads of different experience, and move back. But I actually ended up staying at the same studio for 8 years. Started as a junior there and ended up as creative director. And then not long after making creative director there was when I actually decided to go freelance, so I could try and cram in a few other studios. Get some experience there.
Was that? Can we say what studio that was that you were?
Yeah. It was a studio called Purpose. So again, we actually went there in uni, didn't we? And we did. They did a little tour and a little talk for us. And I kept in touch with Rob, the creative director there. And when I was looking to come down to London, he was one of the people I got in touch with. I saw that, I mean, when I joined there were 8 people all in one room. And by the time I left, it was around 45. So kind
Yeah.
of saw a studio grow from smallish into quite a sort of medium to large size studio. So I think it did, although I stayed in one place, it did give me a good sort of idea of what's involved in being a small studio through to sort of a larger studio and all the things that come with that.
Yeah.
And it was just great experience, and I was doing really great work, and it just felt a bit daft to sort of move on for the sake of moving on.
Yeah.
But then I did a little year of freelance after I left there, which then did help me just to go around and try different studios. I worked in very small ones. I did a little stint at Apple working in-house for them. I'd never worked in-house at a big brand before, so I wanted to see what that was like and if I liked it or not.
How did you find that working in-house?
It was good. I think it cemented my sort of thought that I had all along, really, that I wanted to work in a small studio. And the good thing about being a small studio is you get to do everything, whereas Apple, being the big behemoth it is, you're very sort of compartmentalized, and you have your little bit that you do. And obviously we were working with the US as well, so it was quite a strange process where you'd come in the morning, you'd have a brief or some feedback, you'd work on it all day, you'd present it just before you went home, which is when San Francisco got in.
Yeah.
They then either work on it through the night or get feedback, and then you'd carry on. So it was like this kind of 24-hour design process. It was quite surreal. And you sort of, the way it worked there, you're basically working up through a ladder of presenting to different people until eventually you get to Phil, I can't remember his last name, but Phil and Tim Cook basically eventually get to see everything. And you can go through weeks of building up, going through different levels of management to get to them, and they just go, "No, it's rubbish." And then you straight back down to the bottom of it.
Start again on the hamster wheel.
Whereas when you're small, as you know, it's like you're responsible for everything. It's, your decisions are your decisions, and obviously you have a client to deal with, but there's much more control over it. And you get to do everything from taking the briefs to the concepts through to the artwork and everything in between, really. Whereas Apple was very different to that.
I remember,
nonetheless, good experience.
I remember when because I went traveling in 2011. I went to Australia. When I came back, I actually worked at a larger agency over in Leicester called Juice Creative. Brilliant little company, and they were little still. They were quite small, but I think there was 13, 14 people there. So it was still small compared to Purpose where you were, but they had a couple of really good accounts with some confectionery brands. And I thought, this is going to be brilliant, Mars bars, Maltesers. Then they had a couple of pet foods as well. What was the other one? Caesar, Sheba, Pedigree, Chum, Whiskers. So you look at these brands and you think, this is going to be brilliant. This is going to be really great fun. But actually, when you work in the bigger the brand, the more restricted you are. You can't really experiment with color. There's a particular, corporate typeface that you have to use. There's minimum sizes for this, maximum sizes for that. That image can only be used with it. It's very restrictive. When you're small, you can pick and choose who you work with, and it's great if you get a big account like that because that effectively pays the bills. But the smaller companies, you can have a bit more fun with, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as Common Curiosity now, I think we have quite a nice mix of, we work with bigger companies like Google, who are much more in that realm where there's, a 80-page brand book that details type sizes down to the minutiae. And then we work with, one-man band publishers and people like that. And there's definitely more creative license in the smaller stuff. And I think actually one of the lessons I really learned from Purpose as well is there was a job came in for an agricultural farming consultancy that came into the studio, and it was one of those jobs that everybody was like, "Oh God, that sounds so dull," and nobody really wanted to do it. I ended up working on it, and it became, without doubt, the most successful job I've ever done. It's one of the ones I'm most proud of. Won a load of awards with it. And it's kind of like almost those opportunities anywhere that you can, you have to look for them really, and no opportunity is a bad opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big learning for me really, and I think quite a lot of people were. I remember they always used to say that I sort of used to get some of the better jobs, and it's like, well, that was a job that nobody wanted.
Yeah.
It was through me and the team working on it turned it into this great thing.
It's
But
about finding that nugget of gold, isn't it? Like every job, there's something interesting in every job. You've just got to dig it out, and if you can find it and excavate it successfully, you can then find your hook and do something really nice with it.
Yeah, and I think, again, coming back to the sort of size of organisations, I think when you're looking at smaller organisations, they're slightly more willing to take risks and be braver with what they're doing, whereas when you're in larger organisations and you've got different tiers of sign off and responsibilities, there's a little bit more of an air towards safety with things, and they don't want to be the one that's took a bit of a risk with something and it hasn't paid off. So I find it a bit easier to deal with smaller companies and push them a bit further. But that said, I think there's still a nice challenge in working with bigger brands and trying to push them and do new things with them. But I think like a mix is ideal, really. I mean, the budgets between a small company and a Google are quite different. Obviously, we do social media posts for Google, which sometimes for small agencies will be a brand identity. So you have to have a balance of them, really.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought now. Where was I? So I went freelance anyway and did a little bit at Apple and some other studios. And then I sort of had a little 2-month period where sort of everything kind of turned on its head for me, really. And me and Beck had been thinking about moving back to Birmingham for reasons of wanting kids and buying houses and things like that, which at the time when we were in London was just impossible. I think the house we've got now would have probably bought us a shed in London. So we were starting to think about it anyway. But me and Beck went to New York, so I'd won an award over there, and it was quite a big deal at the time. So this was sort of one for me personally, that a sort of portfolio competition. We went over there to get it. I proposed when I was over there, and then when I got back, I found out my mom was terminally ill. And within the space of a week, I left London, moved back to Birmingham, moved into my mom's house, and was sort of there with her. Beck left her job. 2 months later, we'd left the house, left London. I'd stopped freelancing, and then I was back in Birmingham. And
I remember that was a really hectic period for you, wasn't it? That was
it was just it was around Christmas time, like October, November time, then in the build up to Christmas. And then sort of after my mom had passed away, I had this period where I wasn't freelancing, I wasn't working, and it was sort of like, what am I going to do now? There was obviously lots of things to sort out with my mom's house and stuff. But then I had 2 emails in the space of a week, one from a client I used to work with at Royal Mail, who knew I was freelance, but basically said, we've got a project, would you be interested in working on it? And I said yes. And then a few days later, I had a recommendation from one of my friends, Emma. She had just transitioned from having been a freelance into starting to go into teaching. So she'd had someone approach her with a brand identity job that she couldn't do, passed it over to me. So then I had 2 bits of work then, and it was kind of like, right, I've got enough work now for 2 to 3 months to pay the bills. So I'll do that and see where it takes me. And then one job rolled into another, and gradually got busier and busier. I was doing it on my own for about a year. And then Alex, who I used to work with at Purpose, rang me up. And well, actually, I rang him up because I was stressed and had too much work. So Al came and helped me, especially I was going on holiday and I had this lovely job with Royal Mail Land. And he basically got me out of a bit of a hole with that. We started working on a few projects together, and then just thought we could actually do this full time and, join together and make a studio. Obviously there was, we're based in different cities, so it's a slightly unusual setup, I guess, for probably the, what you consider a conventional small studio for the 2 of us not to be together. But we know a couple of other people that have done it and make it work. And, we're sort of obviously lucky in this day and age with all the tools that we have to work remotely.
Yeah.
And that was,
you've been working remotely since before it was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
I mean, that's kind of the thing with, we'll probably come on to the whole COVID last year thing, but I think when it first happened, I remember the upheaval people were having with working from home. Me and Alex, we literally brought our laptops, our screens home, plugged in, carry on as normal. So it was all very sort of natural for us, really.
Yeah.
Quite lucky about. But yeah, that was 4 years ago, and then we've just sort of been slowly building since then. Really, we haven't grown. We've stayed the two of us, but just used kind of freelance as and when we need. And yeah,
Did you dabble with staff at one point, or did you just go down the freelance, like more consistent freelancer?
yeah, we had a sort of longer term project management come and help us for 6 months. The way we sort of operate as a business is we like to keep a small core team and then use sort of freelance and specific expertise as and when we need it.
Yeah.
We had a couple of jobs come in that was very heavy on the logistics and project management, two big event jobs that needed I think 100 odd pieces of graphics for everything from lanyards to 20-meter walls.
Yeah.
So we needed somebody to come and just manage all that for us. So that's when we had that, and it's certainly something we're considering growing in more of a full-time capacity rather than freelance. But obviously at the moment it's we're just sort of seeing how things go for a few months, I think, before we start
take the plunge.
Yeah. I think that's probably us, really.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it's a really nice story. That, because remember when we were at uni, I think like our little sort of friendship group, like quite a few of us were like interested in going to London. And I think if my memory serves you correctly, you were more anti-London at first, but then those trips that we went on, I remember them quite vividly actually. That kind of convinced you that actually this is something I want to explore more. And you went with your gut feeling. You were successful in getting the right role. I remember that really shaped you as a designer, like from the very outset. And then nice that you've come full circle. You come back to your hometown, and you now got a successful a small agency, office in Birmingham, office in London. So it's a really nice story. That what I'd like to touch on now is probably something delve a little bit deeper into that big old brain of yours, and talk about your why and the motivations for what you do. So I know I've given you a bit of a prompt for this, so I'm hoping you've put some thought into it, because it's quite a difficult one to pinpoint, but let's have a chat about that. So
yeah, it's funny actually when you asked me, because I mean, the way we work on brand identity projects is we essentially look for companies wise and articulate that and then visually represent it. But it's that age old thing of we've never properly done it for ourselves, really. We've
plumber's
never
leaky tap.
down. Yeah, exactly. And we've never really spent time trying to articulate it. We've never properly done things like values and missions, which is things we do as bread and butter with brand projects. So when somebody asks you and you're a bit like, oh, we really should be able to like answer this instantly. So I've done a little bit of thinking, and I'll sort of say what I'd wrote down anyway. But I think why is also quite an interesting word in our practice, actually, aside from this, this kind of core Simon Sinek kind of why. But firstly, I wrote down that sort of we believe that great organizations deserve their stories to be told both purposefully and beautifully. I think that's why. It's probably not as refined and crafted as it eventually will be at some point. Quite similar to what you said yours was, actually. But for us, I think the first word is great, and we only work with organizations that we believe in, and we're on board with what they're doing. We don't work with any of the sort of nasties, because as running a studio, we have complete control over the clients that we work with, and we don't really want to work with companies that aren't nice or do things that we believe in. So firstly, that's kind of the big pivotal thing. But I mean, we essentially try to take what is special and interesting and unique about those companies and help tell that story both beautifully. Obviously, that's a big part of what we do in graphic design, is try to make things look nice and people be attracted to them visually.
Yeah.
But also for us, the word sort of purpose and meaning is really important to us as well. And this comes back to the whole why thing. And why is probably the most commonly used word in our studio, because the way that we work is we question every single decision that we make. So why are we using that color? Why is it that typeface? And the answer should always lead back to that core sentiment in the middle of a brand or a project. And when you're presenting to a client, if you're making subjective decisions on things, you can only really argue your point based on, well, I like that color. Whereas if you're doing it based on why and their why, they may say, well, I don't like red. And you say, well, okay, but it's red for this reason. And this reason communicates fundamentally, something important about your business. So it's quite hard for them to then argue about it then, and you can take subjectivity out of it and say, okay, I can see the rationale and the reason of why it is that and why they've done it like that. And it makes sense. So why is actually really important to us on quite a lot of levels, and it's something that we really drill into students whenever we talk to them and young designers. And I think it all comes back to when we were at university, actually. And I think when I went into uni, I used to design with my eyes, and I used to love club culture and house flyers and posters and stuff like that. But then when I got to uni, we got taught how to design with our brains, and how to, design isn't just making things pretty. It's strategic thinking and making decisions. And we had a book, didn't we, called Smile in the Mind, which is sort of our Bible. And that little, the title of it, I think, is just amazing. That the idea that you're making somebody's mind smile and using wit and intelligence. There's two.
It's just down there beyond my shoulder. But that's the copy I had when we were at university, and I bought the second edition like a few years ago. But it is a brilliant book, that, and I think you're right there. Designing with your brain. I can remember it when we were sat in critiques. We weren't allowed to use the phrase when somebody challenged the design decision that we made in a piece of work. We weren't allowed to sit there and say it's because it looks nice. You had to justify it. And at the time, I thought, this is just like, I've chosen it because it looks nice. But they were wanting you to work the thought process through harder. And I think that's something that you've embraced fully going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, me and Alex also joke that we're quite bad designers if we've just got to make things look pretty for the sake of it. So I think we have a reliance on trying to figure out a reason behind things, so that we can go in our minds, okay, I know that looks good and is right. And it helps our process massively as well. It helps the decision-making process. It helps selling it into clients. It helps making those routes go through without meddling too much, and things like that. And that book was the beginning of it for me, really, and I still reference it now. And essentially what we're trying to do is create work that people remember, isn't it? And the best way to do that is make people smile, whether that's on their face or in their mind. But if you can make people smile and remember you, then the job's done, really, as a graphic designer, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a really interesting topic, why, and I'm pretty sure we could speak for bloody hours on it. But I really enjoy listening to other designers talk about this in particular, because the root of everybody's why is very similar. Like, you spoke a lot about telling stories beautifully with purpose. I talk about engaging visual stories to build better brands. And it's all about growth and success. And we do learn visually. We're like, humans are visual types of learning. If you think about how we communicate, like centuries ago, the first evidence of communication was cave paintings. And this is a skill that being able to draw and visually articulate messages and narrative. I just hope it's something that we never lose, because it's such a talent to be able to do it well.
Yeah, and I think also what those cave paintings did is there were stories as well. and that's what we're doing. What, 15,000 years later, we're
Yeah.
still trying to tell stories in beautiful pictures.
Yeah.
So it's lasted that long. So hopefully we'll be in a career for another few years at least.
Yeah. Oh, fingers crossed. Yeah.
I,
So,
I think humans resonate with stories, don't they? And
yeah.
you know, I think it's a big learning for brands that they have to tell their why and their story to their customers, because yes, on some levels there's a functional exchange of perhaps buying a product or using a service,
Mm,
but they can buy that product or that service from multiple other companies.
mm,
So why pick you? What's
yeah.
your thing? I mean, I always use Patagonia as a great example of a brand. I mean, you can buy a t-shirt from absolutely, thousands of different places.
Mm,
I buy mine from Patagonia because their why and their purpose and their story is at the forefront of their brand.
mm,
And it's about, yes, they're a clothing brand, but they're just massive on the environment and making the world a better, greener place. And that's what I want to do as well. So
mm,
I buy into that brand, probably more so for their story than their product. I mean, thankfully their product's really good as well.
mm,
But that's what makes me pick them over buying a Nike t-shirt or an Adidas t-shirt. It's the story that resonates with me and what
yeah.
makes me want to be involved with that brand. And
Yeah.
I know Patagonia is an obvious choice, but it makes no difference if you're a plumber or Patagonia. There's still a
Yeah.
uniqueness and something special about every company that people need to know, because it helps make them choose you over somebody else.
Yeah, I think there's a phrase, a really great quote, and I can't remember. I heard it the other day, literally a week ago. I can't remember who it was quoted to, but absolutely brilliant quote that just sums up everything that you just said there, which is "Sell to the heart, the head will follow."
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it like that literally summarizes what branding is in a sentence. And
yeah,
I think
yeah. That's very
it's,
good.
I'd love to be able to backtrack and find out who said it, because I thought it was brilliant. And it's probably something I'm going to use going forward as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Just claim it,
um, yeah, I'll take that one.
Ryan.
Gareth, 37 Salisbury.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. So thanks for sort of discussing that, because I'm sure that there'll be people picking up on that maybe haven't considered thinking about their why, that might actually take that forward and go through the process of discovering their why. And it can seem quite daunting at first to do that. I know I found it a bit daunting to think about that when I first looked into it and read the book by Simon Sinek. But sometimes it's not as complicated as you think, and you often overthink these things. But the root of what I do and what you do is very, very simply that we're storytellers and we like to visually express stories. And there's something that you said when you were talking just now, that we respond to stories, and I think that is so true. You tell a story, you're going to interest somebody. If you tweak their interest, they'll engage with that story so much more than they would a sales pitch. So telling stories is important, and that's part of why I decided to set this podcast up, because I like talking to people about stories and hearing their stories, because I do think that we learn and grow through hearing stories. So thank you for sharing yours there. I'd like to move the discussion forward a little bit and just talk about some of your challenges in business. And I appreciate that's quite a broad sort of area, but every business has a challenge. Yours is a small studio in Birmingham doing some great work. What are the challenges for you?
I'm not going to talk too much about COVID, because I think that's been a challenge for everyone, hasn't it? And as I said, we've been luckier than most. Obviously, as we were talking about earlier, we can pretty much carry on as normal, which I'm incredibly thankful about. There has obviously been ups and downs over the last year, but I think Touchwood being so as small as we are, already being in different locations, has meant that we've been able to get over those challenges quite successfully. There's been dips in work, as I think everybody's had. I think what that has done for us has just allowed us some time to actually address probably, I think, our biggest challenge as a company, and that is actually trying to spend time working on the business rather than in it. I think myself and Alex are graphic designers. That's what we do. That's what we love. I mentioned that I left Purpose when I was a creative director quite quickly after being promoted. And kind of the main reason was because I'd moved so far away from doing the design, and I was managing and running teams and looking after people, that I kind of longed to just get back to scribbling and designing. And myself and Alex have said we don't want to move away from doing that as a studio. We don't want to get too big because we want to stay hands on the tools.
Yeah.
The problem is we're very hands on the tools, and we find it very difficult to step away and spend time doing new business, PR, the running of a business, basically. I think we've been lucky so far that we've done lots of good work and clients have been very happy. So it's kind of naturally rolled, and we haven't had to spend loads of time doing those things.
Yeah.
But equally, I think we've probably hit maybe a little bit of a plateau now where we need to be much more proactive and actually carve out some time to work on the business.
Yeah.
And spend more time doing PR, doing new business. There's loads of things that I don't say we don't get time to do, because we should just make time to do them. But the problem is when we have a lovely brief in our inbox, we have some spreadsheets, some forecasting, the new brief in the inbox just wins all the time. Even when we're doing things that we should be doing on the business, the sketch pad's in front of us, our mind is thinking, oh, I've got a nice idea for that logo, and we're scribbling away. And I think probably that is our biggest challenge, is trying to spend more time doing the business. And I think there's things that we'd like to do in the next few years, like grow the team a little bit, and start to get some slightly bigger work. All of that really requires us to take some time out of the day-to-day. But it's one of those sort of vicious circles, really. I mean, we mentioned growing the team. We'd like to have one or two more members of staff potentially over the next year or two. That will really help us have that time to be away from the work so much. But it's like that circle of like, well, we need to get them, but I need to sort of spend the time figuring out exactly what we need, what the role is, what what we want them to do, to be able to get them to then help us have that time. So I mean, in some respects, COVID was quite good for that, because we did have 2 or 3 spells where we were quiet, and we managed to have some time to chat through some things and make a few plans and things. So I think that's probably our sort of biggest challenge, and I think that kind of leads on to really about us sort of growing the business, starting to get in slightly bigger work. I think being a 2-man studio, I think the world is much more open to working with smaller studios now, that especially bigger brands. And I, when I started, it was like the big brands went to the big agencies. In reality, those big brands were working with a team of 2, 3, 4, 5 people within those agencies, but there was still this kind of feeling that, well, we're a big brand, we need to go to a big studio. And I've noticed that change lately. I've seen a lot of smaller studios come out of bigger studios. Clients are much more willing to go and work with smaller studios, knowing that you're essentially, with me and Alex, you've got the same project team that have delivered big projects with Purpose, but now we can actually be much more focused and much more agile on that job. But you're still getting all that knowledge, all that operational understanding of how to run projects. That's all still there. But actually, you're just getting it at a slightly cheaper rate because we have less overheads. And we are much more focused. You won't be dealing with other people in the business. It's all through us. But I think it's trying to sort of sell that to clients, I think, a little bit. I think although there is a change, I think there is still hesitancy a little bit that, dealing with a smaller studio, I think some are a little bit worried about it. And I think that's probably a challenge that we're starting to see a little bit now. We're going for pitches and tenders and getting through to the final few, and sometimes not quite making it over the last hurdle. And that, that might be down to other factors, but I think our size does potentially have a little impact on that.
It can help and it can hinder, can't it? And probably in equal measure, really. And
yeah,
I think if you've already got a client on board and you're doing some good stuff, they're much more likely to stick with you. But sometimes it's breaking into those new ones and that sort of next level of like service to scale of brand or business.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it does. But there has been, I think you're absolutely bang on. There's a noticeable shift in how clients are. The thing is, like, what do you categorize as a big agency now? Because my perception of some of the bigger London agencies is that there's a core team of like 4 or 5 directors, and then a ton of freelancers on 6-month contracts. And is that like really, is that any different to working with a small studio? Because if you landed that, you get freelancers in as well. So like sometimes I think like the perception of an agency is based on far-flung sort of reputation from many moons ago, that maybe isn't quite right. In the industry's different now, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I think the word there's perception. It is, we know that from being on the inside of agencies. Clients probably don't know that. They think that an 80-man studio is 80 full-time members of staff, but in reality it works the same way as what we do. They'll have a small team, they'll supplement with certain freelancers and experts in certain things as they need to. It's just they'll have lots of different accounts, whereas we'll have 2 or 3. So it's very similar, and I think the world has transitioned much more now, and probably will even more so with COVID, into much more of a lots of independent, smaller studios that have a niche and have a speciality that team up and work with other studios. I mean, we do it with strategy, with animation, copywriting. Part of our business model is to have us at the middle, and then this almost satellites of different experts that if we need a website building, we don't just have one web agency. We have an agency that do some really cool cutting edge, quite, I hate to word the use hipster, but quite sort of stuff. Ones that can deliver big websites with complex sort of Shopify needs or ticketing systems. So we have all these people that we call upon. We still manage it and do it as if we were in another studio, but it means those people aren't sat around in our business earning a wage and us having to cover that money to essentially pay them. We use people as and when we need, and just plug in at the right people at the right time, essentially. And I think things will move more towards that now. I have noticed that sort of middle ground of agency around the sort of 30-40 people, a lot of them have gone, and they've either set up small studios or they've moved into the big behemoth brand studios that the sort of super unions and people like that are doing huge accounts.
It's interesting that you say this, because that sort of like collaborative way of working is, I mean, I've run Design Pit like that for 9 years, basically. And you secure your clients, your accounts, and then you bring in who you need when you need to. I tried to sort of bring in as much in-house as I possibly could using the talent that I had in my team 4 or 5 years ago, and it was great. And it is a great way of working, because you keep your overhead low, you can keep your cost competitive, and you don't frighten the life out of some clients who, they're not quite sure what to expect when you put proposals and quotes in. But I do think you're right. I think there's going to be a lot more sort of boutique sort of size agencies coming into the industry in the wake of COVID as well. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately there is going to be lots of people that have lost jobs through this, and I know a few that have then either gone freelance or they're just doing their own work, and it's obviously not a nice way to sort of transition into doing your own thing, but I think a few of those people will probably look back in a couple of years and maybe think it was the best thing that happened to them, and it's given them a fresh start. They're up on their own, and I mean, you'll probably agree with me here, but when I was thinking about it, it felt like a massive deal to start a company, and it didn't really materialize like that. It was very much a few jobs trickled in, they led to other jobs, and it kind of built out of
organically.
Yeah, and I always had visions that it would be like, you know, say me and Al would sit down, we'd have no business, we'd sit there with a piece of paper, write a business plan, right where we wanted to be in 5 years. And it didn't work like that. It was very much just things, as you say, organically evolved and grew. And it wasn't that big, scary, right, we're a business now. It just sort of happened, really. And
Yeah.
I think that is the way to do it. I mean, the early days are hard, as you know. Money's tough to get in. I mean, I don't think we had any money for the first 10, 12 months. And it was very much just floating around zero and borrowing bits here and there. But, you hit a point where it starts to accumulate, and then you can start to invest in studios and different things like that. And I think it is, we still haven't got a business plan. That's another thing we need to get done when saying we need to get, more time on the business. It's to do those things.
If it makes you feel any better, mate, I've not got a business plan, never have. My business plan when I started out was basically earn enough money to feed myself, go to the gym and play rugby at the weekend. That was pretty much it. And ultimately our businesses are quite simple. It's secure clients, sell enough fee to do the work, the type of work you want, and to make a profit. It is quite simple, but I know what you mean. Sometimes it does feel good to have that documentation in place, but it's quite alien to a lot of creative people to work in such a regimented sort of administrative sort of process like that.
Yeah, it is. And I think our profession is probably more like, I mean, I feel quite lucky really that it's more like a hobby that we do as a job and get paid to do. And we didn't set up a business to grow it to 100 people and sell it to WPP for a few million. That's not what we're in it for. We're in it predominantly to do nice work and enjoy what we do, like you say, feed our families and things like that. And I think what we did very early on, and what we still do now, is just focus on doing really good work. If you do that, you'll have happy clients. They'll recommend you to other people. Your business will grow like that. And if you're constantly trying to do good work for people, then your business will grow without business plans and things like that. And you obviously have to, know where you want to go and where you want to be and try and build for that. And I think probably as we start to get older as a studio, we'll do more of those things now. But I think in 10 years' time, our philosophy will still be the same. Just focus constantly on just doing great work for people. And over deliver, have happy clients, and I think the rest of it is kind of secondary to that, really.
It's doing exactly what you said earlier on, going back to the why. Don't venture too far away from that, and make sure that when things aren't going right, things are going really well and things aren't going so well, you still come back to that, and you don't lose track about why. So that's really good. It's really interesting in the way that conversation went there, because we spoke about the challenges, and we also heard some of your goals for the future as well. So grow the studio in the next couple of years, and continue to do great work, but also work on the business as well. So it's good to hear that there are some forward plans there for you as you sort of develop that studio going forward.
Goal setting isn't something we put massive priority on. I think it's something, again, as we grow, it might be more financial goals and things like that, rather than we're not particularly driven by, we want to have 50 people in 10 years time, or we want to win so many awards a year. We're not really driven by things like that. I think we just want to be doing good work that we enjoy and having happy clients and interesting work. And our goals aren't really much bigger than that, really. I mean, maybe that's a lack of ambition, I don't know, but
I don't think so. I think goals are different. I'm reading a really interesting book at the minute, Eddie Hearn, the boxing promoter. And he talks about goals a lot, and he uses goals as a real driver for himself personally and in his business. But he does sort of like really ram home the point. Goals are different for everybody, and often they're not financial, and it's almost better if they're not financial in some ways. It's a really good book. I'd recommend it if you've got. I know you read quite a bit, but Relentless by Eddie Hearn. It's really interesting. I'm about halfway through, and like goals are a funny topic, and it might be a good topic for a podcast in the future, really. But I don't think they're small goals at all. I think to continue what you're doing at the level that you are, I think they're really big goals that are, Paul. So
yeah, and I think the point about finance and money is an interesting one, and I think we've started to kind of have conversations with people more about the business than design, and I find design is quite a unique industry in that a lot of the people in it aren't in it to get rich.
Yeah.
Obviously we all want to be comfortable and have money. Mine and Alex's goals are not to be a millionaires, because if that was the case, that is doable within the design industry. But I think, like we were talking about earlier, you transition to a studio that has massive brands and massive accounts where, the financials are the key driver for those. I don't know if you ever watched Mad Men, but, the way a lot of their business was judged was by the amount the account was worth.
Yeah.
And to us, that isn't a driving factor for us. We obviously want to make money. We'd be a terrible business if we didn't, but it falls below doing great work for us. I like to think doing great work helps you make money, but it's not a key driver for us. And I think when we've been talking to certain kind of business people, I always have this conversation a lot of the time with sometimes with web developers that contact me and say that our website isn't very SEO friendly, and I'm like, I don't want it to be, which sounds amazing to them. They just cannot get their head around it. But I personally don't want our site to be something, if you type in graphic design in Birmingham, comes at the top, or graphic design in London. I want people to come to us that have not Googled us, if that makes sense. So I want them to have known of us through other people, or they've seen us on a website and they've invested the time in getting to know us. We had a great new business call yesterday, and I always ask the question of like, how did you find us? And she answered it and talked us through our portfolio and some of our work better than we do. And I know that she's invested in us and our approach and the way we do things.
Yeah.
Whereas I think people can sometimes just want some bog standard design and type you into Google and they're like, we just need this and we need it cheap and we need it quick. And that's not what we do. We're not quick. We can be, but it's not our business model to be like that. I mean, the way we approach design takes a lot of time. As you know, it's not as quick as people think. No. Especially when you're designing with your brain, there's lots that go into it. And I think business is quite a similar thing. It's because we're not driven by money. The decisions that we take, we turn clients down quite a lot because we're not, there's not a chemistry there, or we don't particularly like what they do. And if you've got a shop, it's like you sell your product to anybody. The more people that come in and you sell it to, the better. Whereas with us, it's like we're selective of who we work with, which kind of goes against lots of business principles, doesn't it? So I think it is a slightly niche industry, and there obviously are others, but yeah, I think that's probably another challenge, really, that, I've read lots of books on business and I end up getting a few pages in and I'm just like, I don't agree with this already.
Yeah. And it's good though that your demographic, where you want your work to come from. It's very much word of mouth. It's very much reputation based, but it's also the type of person that will take time to research you and understand that actually these guys are a good fit for us. Let's get in touch. And I think that is important. I think like design is a process, and it's not a product, or it is a service, but it's not like a stereotypical service in as much as you've got to place a lot of trust in your designer. Yeah. Because that designer's got, as you were saying earlier on, they've got to delve deep into under the bonnet of this business to really understand how the brand works. And you've got to really put a lot of trust into that person. So I think that's actually a really good indication of like where you are as a businessman, in as much as you understand the right type of person for you. And that's something that I've always historically struggled with, because my client list is so varied in terms of like, age, male, female, like industry, like it's very, very vastly different. You know, like I think you've got a better handle on that than you probably realise.
Yeah, but I think variety is a great thing to have as a business, for different reasons. I mean, if you're predominantly in work with the hospitality trade at the moment, you're going to be having a rough time of it. Whereas if you've got clients spread across lots of industries, but also, I mean, varieties, we all love it, don't we? I mean, we go one day working on some stamps, the next day doing a slides doc for Google, and we have such a range of stuff that makes work interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hope that didn't come across sort of egotistical about just like we want people to like what we do, but we find it is really important that they buy into our approach and our process, because there's hundreds of design studios out there. You know, our approaches are different, aren't they, in the way that we do work and our specialities. And I just want to make sure that the people that we work with have chosen us based on our approach. So we've done it before where we've worked with people and you end up sort of butting heads a bit with them because we're trying to do our thing and they're not bought into it. And I think looking back at those clients, we've probably known that from the outset, but you know, might have been swayed by the type of company it was or potentially the budget maybe. But I think as we're starting to grow, we're actually realizing that it's quite important that people are invested in us as much as we are in them, and they want to work with us because of our approach. And it just means that the process of the job and the journey is much smoother. And ultimately we get better work out of it. I mean, we just worked with an architect last year, probably been our most successful job, I'd say.
Sculpt.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I mean, we're lucky with him that he's obviously in the creative field as well, so he very much gets the creative process. But he's invested very much in how we approach work, and he let us do our thing. Obviously, he had comments and feedback, and you know, we're not one of these studios that's like we're right all the time, because actually, client feedback generally makes the work better that we do. But he still understood what we were trying to do and let us sort of go on our process, and I think we all ended up with much better work at the end of it. So that is quite important to us, I think, just, you know, the sort of chemistry between us and a client, and that's something that we're starting to, I think, get better and a bit more on it with now as well.
Well, that's cool. It sounds like there's been you know, a lot of learning curves along the way, but you know, it's great to hear that journey. So thank you for sharing that. I'm just conscious of time, so I want to sort of move the discussion on to maybe have a quick sort of a quick few minutes on your adjustment into parenting, because that's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
Yeah, I should have said that as my biggest challenge, I think, really. Yeah, it's been it's hard to answer this question properly because most of my parenting has been in lockdown. So in terms of adjusting to it, there's been pros and cons, really. I think I mean, obviously having a child is a massive pro, isn't it? And I've loved it. And I think one of the very great things for me that has come out of the last year and everything that's happened is he was born in November 2019. So I had a few months of going into the studio, normal life, working, going to watch my football team once a week, going to play football and having a normal life, essentially, to then being completely locked down. But what actually happened was I was here all the time. So if I want to go and see Alfie, I can nip down and see him for 10 minutes. And lots of things that happen in the first year of him starting to eat, him starting to walk, crawl, all these things, I've been here for it. Whereas a lot of those things could have happened while I was at work, and Beck could have just sent me a photo of it. So for me, one of the great things that the last year has been is that I'm just around. And I don't think before COVID, I would have thought I could work from home a few days a week. I just don't think that would have occurred to me. I think I'd have just kept going into the studio and just carried on life as normal. So from that perspective, it has been great. I feel like I've got a really good bond with him, and I'm around him a lot more than what I would have been. And you know, he goes to bed at 7. If I was still at work, I probably would get home at 6:30, 6:45, see him for 15 minutes, and then he's in bed. whereas I see him loads now. But obviously it has been quite intense at the same time. So,
Yeah.
There's no real way to switch off from either work or being a dad.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds sort of like, I don't know, not horrible, but like, I think time to yourself, like you said, having your time to yourself is important, even if
Yeah.
it's, I play football for an hour a week. And even before Alfie, that used to be so important to me, to just go focus completely on playing football and not have anything else in my mind, no work, no life stresses, just
Vital.
for an hour. And it was amazing for me.
Yeah.
Same with going to watch the football. It's kind of like my mindfulness, really, where I can go and just not think about other stuff and just be focused on kicking a ball around.
I used to go to the gym every morning, Monday to Friday, 5:30 till about 6:30, 7:15. I used to go to the gym. I used to get up nice and early, and that hour was just so precious to me. And when they shut the gyms in lockdown, I felt like I'd lost a limb. It was. And now what I'm finding, because we obviously moved during lockdown, and what I'm finding myself, I completely lost all routine, and it was really bad for a while because I wasn't productive at all. But what I did was, I've started in the last couple of weeks just getting up early, getting up, going downstairs, letting the dog out, cup of coffee, sorry, and just think about the day ahead, and just mentally prepare myself and just wake myself up gradually. I hate waking up, like throwing some clothes on, brushing teeth, and just hitting the studio. I hate that. And that mindfulness is like be kind to yourself, give yourself a bit of time. An hour a day is like something like 4% of your day or something like that, and it's so key. So I think that getting away from it is important, and that does include like family as well, doesn't it? Because at the minute we're on top of each other, so you need to get that time sort of to separate yourself from it all, don't you?
Yeah, and I think my adaptation I'll fully understand it once things start to go back to normal a little bit. I think it is very full on at the moment, isn't it? And there's ups and downs, and he's starting to sleep a little bit more now. So I am having a little period where if I need to catch up on some stuff after he's gone to bed, there was a point where I was just the thought of turning on my laptop after he'd gone to bed, because we were up so much in the night, I just couldn't do it. Now he's sleeping much better, I can dip into work a little bit after if I want to go and spend an hour with him downstairs or something. And I don't feel like I've worked out any processes or anything yet, really, but I think it's starting to get to the phase now. Beck's back to work as well, where we're going to have to start planning in some routines. And I'm having Friday off this week, which Beck suggested to me, because Alfie's at nursery, Beck's at work, and she's like, why don't you just have a day off just on your own? And it was one of those things that it just sounded revolutionary at the time. And I was just like, that actually sounds incredible. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably just going to go for a walk, go and get a coffee, maybe put some pictures on the wall. But actually just having a bit of sort of like, I hate the phrase me time, but it is just a bit of time to myself to just not have to be worrying about emails or work or, what's Alfie doing? What's he putting in his mouth? To just chill out a little bit. And I think that's probably something this year I want to get better at doing, and not feel guilty about wanting some time on my own. Because I think, when the little ones are young, and Beck does more than me with Alfie, without doubt. So then I start to think like all of my time away from work, I need to be with Alfie and helping her. But actually, like, you do have to have time for yourself, and I think it makes you a better dad and a better partner and a better founder and business owner, or whatever you want to call it. So that's something this year I need to get much better at, and I hope as he gets older that will be slightly easier as well, I think.
You work it out as you go. I'm really conscious on time, mate, so what I want to do is just quickly sort of have a recap on your top 3 tips for students leaving uni this year or next year. As a designer who's been practicing for a long time now, what would your top 3 tips be for anyone coming out of academia into the world of work?
I think first one is don't be intimidated or scared, firstly, because this industry is so nice and supportive, and it will feel like a huge deal to reach out to somebody who runs a company or a creative director. But 99% of the people I've encountered in this industry are all lovely. We've all been in their situation. All of us want to help. So don't sort of build up this big barrier of being fearful of getting in touch with people, because, you know, the worst they can say is we haven't got any positions at the moment. That's it. That's literally the worst it can be. So don't be intimidated by it, and just put yourself out there. I mean, we're lucky that in some ways they're obviously very unlucky with the situation, but also lucky with how many platforms there are. There's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, Twitter, obviously email, phone calls. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with people. You don't have to pick up the phone and ring a scary person. You know, a nice email with a portfolio attached is fine. So I think firstly, don't be scared. Secondly, always remember that people employ people as much as they do as your portfolio. So yes, your portfolio is going to get your foot in the door. So spend time, make sure it looks great and the stories are very clear. But also make sure that you know the company you're applying to, you know their work, show an interest in them, and you need your passion and enthusiasm to come out in when you're speaking to them, because, you know, I'd say 40% is your portfolio, 60% is you. We're all humans, so don't feel like you have to be really formal in you know, interviews, and just be yourself and be passionate. And then my third one, I think, I've probably forgot loads, but my third one is your portfolio itself doesn't end when you finish uni. Your portfolio will be your biggest design project that you have in your life. It will be constantly going. So don't think I've finished that project now. It's in my portfolio. Keep working into it, and you might have ideas for, oh, I could have done this extra bit. Keep going on it and refining it, and keep working on it. It's a constant thing, and you're going to learn new things and new techniques that you can perhaps bring into older work and refresh it. So I think just keep working on your portfolio, and make sure that your work is the hero and it looks as good as it can be. Photograph things well. Make sure that images are as big and bold and uncluttered as possible. I think that's probably my top three, I think.
Paul, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. I think that does add some value.
Because I've waffled for the rest of it, haven't I?
No. There's been some great takeaways there, and I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting listen for people. So, thank you. I'm going to add quite a bit in the show notes, and you know, please do you know, share this, and I'm sure there's going to be some people that do take a lot away from it. So, really appreciate your time, mate. Good to see you, and hopefully in the next, I don't know what, 2048, we might actually be able to get together for a beer. So
I'll have had a haircut by then as well.
Well, you'll have had a haircut. Mine might have grown back, but I think that's wishful thinking. So anyway, thanks very much, Paul, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Cool. Speak to you soon.
Take it steady, buddy.
Bye.